let's just go on into what the book really sort of emphasizes as the three main theoretical paradigms. In the book, you'll notice as you start reading that they constantly come up with three different ways of looking at human behavior. There might be an additional one or two, but these are the three that come up in every chapter. So I provided a handout for you in the lecture notes, but I'm just going to go over it with you. The first theoretical paradigm that you will see almost in every chapter as a way of explaining human behavior is known as functionalism. Functionalism is associated with Emile Durkheim. He asked this question: why does this society exist the way it does? What makes it work in a positive and functional sort of way? What purpose then do various institutions play in carrying out this particular society? How does it sort of work together to create a stable environment? And then how do people then sustain and maintain these social structures? Social structures like education or politics, how are people involved in that to maintain these social structures? Durkheim and functionalists believe that there is a relationship between human action and their consequences, social institutions and social environment. All of these are interrelated. People are related to the institutions that they're a part of, which then creates a kind of environment in which people exist. And all of these things create and maintain a social order. Functionalists are very interested in this issue of social order and social stability. For example, like say driving in your car, that even in LA, but for the most part, we follow the rules. We get from point A to point B without getting in an accident. And even if we do get in an accident, there are formal procedures as to how to handle that. So hopefully we can coexist together, even though you might have a certain way you want to get to point A, from point B, and I might want to do it this way. We all have to sort of follow the same rules for the safety of others and the safety for ourselves. And this is sort of what functionalists are interested in. How does that happen? How does it happen that we all sort of learn these rules and we abide by them, and for the most part we exist in a very orderly and stable environment. So the strength of a functionalist point of view is that you're really able to examine macro level and micro level social processes. You can look at how the individual fits within the larger structure, and then you can see how these larger social structures impact individuals. It's a very rational explanation, again, for explaining society in terms of stability and order. The weakness of a functionalist point of view is that it doesn't really explain conflict or instability. They for the most part aren't even interested in that question. They're mostly interested in how do we resolve conflict, or how do we resolve instability. That there might be a few instances where someone doesn't follow the rule, but then they end up in jail, right? So they don't really pay attention to this issue of conflict and stability, and that in a sense makes it really difficult then to explain social inequalities. People who can't get ahead, people who can't function well in society. What's the social explanation for that? I mean, a lot of times we might give an individual or psychological explanation, but certainly we can provide a sociological explanation for why that is. And also it can be a little deterministic, that if we do these things, we can have a functional society, a stable society. But in what sense is that really a valuable society, even if it's functional? Does it mean it's equitable? Does it mean that it's a just society? So these are things that the functionalists can't really explain very well. So the next theory that does sort of get into this issue of conflict and instability is known as conflict theory. And these were sort of direct opponents of structural functionalists, especially emerged in the 1960s and built on the work of Max Weber and Karl Marx. And they really emphasize this issue of interest over norms and values. How do people pursue interest in order to get ahead of someone else? So it's not really what keeps society stable, it's rather what do people do in order to ascertain resources or power in order to assert their will or assert what they want in society. And certainly, you can look at the American society and see that there's a certain class of people that dominate other people that have far more power than other groups. And how does this sort of create a structure of inequality? Conflict theorists assert that power is not equally distributed, equally accessible, but rather it operates on these sort of self-interests. So it's not really about how do we maintain order, but how do certain people create a society that's beneficial to them over others. So the strength of conflict theory is that it problematizes social solidarity and stability in order to bring about social change and social conflict. Conflict theorists are really interested in looking at social inequalities, really deconstructing this issue of stability in order to bring forth who isn't getting ahead, how are certain groups dominating others so that they can get ahead. And so hopefully then we can look at inequalities in a very explicit way. A weakness of conflict theory is that it usually is political, right? It's not really like, okay, I just want to explain it, but they actually want to apply it. They want to make, inform policy, civil rights movement, things like that, so that people do have an equal chance at getting what they want. That everybody starts at the same point. That no one sort of has a huge advantage over someone else. The weakness of conflict theory is that because it's explicitly political, then sometimes it's not as objective as other theoretical points of view. And then it also questions social integration to the point where it's not even ideal for conflict theorists to have a stable society. And that can be a problem because, of course, we kind of want to exist in an orderly society. The last theoretical perspective that the book will often look to is known as interactionism. This originated at the University of Chicago, and interactionists are sort of like the in-between theory, looking at the micro level. How do people's behavior inform and create a social environment? They're really looking at the everyday interaction of the individual, looking at how people create meaning between, say, just two people. How does that sort of interaction vary from person to person and environment to environment? They really look at symbols and how these symbols are actually social objects that people use to interact with one another, whether it be language or like nonverbal communication or the things that we wear. All these things are sort of social objects that we use to symbolize who we are as a person, that we're communicating to other people. For interactionists, they believe that meaning is always emergent, fluid, ambiguous, and contextually bound, that there's sort of an agreement that's made between two people that might not be made with a different person. So, for example, this issue of, say, respect, that this is sort of an emergent meaning, that you might have a different set of rules for respect between, say, your mother and yourself versus, say, a significant other, or a teacher-student relationship. That respect is created and constructed in different ways given the actors involved. Interactions are really interested in human action, the dynamics that create human action, and the process in which we are interacting with one another, the sort of human connectedness that we have with one another. So again, they're going to look at symbols, they're going to look at processes and social patterns that then forms a certain kind of social life. The strength of interactionists is that it offers a micro-level analysis, really looks at smaller subsets of society, the individual. Even as small as two people can be interesting for interactionists. A weakness of interactions is that it's hard to make a generalization out of 2 or 3 people. It's difficult to generalize out of that what's happening in society on a macro level. And it doesn't necessarily engage the theoretical issues presented in functional and conflict theory. It's sort of a theory unto itself. Okay, so next, in the last part of the lecture, I'm going to talk about methodology.